Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and I have a great knife today. This is not only one of the coolest blades that I own, it is one of the coolest blades I've ever seen. This is the Brous Blades T4. It's a collaboration between Jason Brous and Jason, I gotta read it for you, Muriel Ribeloff of Tanium Design. Now Tanium Design does not, they don't make knives, they do other stuff. They do like car interiors, exteriors, t-shirts, different things like that. But anyway, Jason Muriel Ribeloff, I guess, had an idea for a knife, and he's local to Jason Brous and sort of sent it to him and said, hey, what about this? And that kind of started things off. So the result is an exceptionally good folding knife. And when I say exceptionally good, I mean this knife does so many things right, it's incredible. Now there are a couple things that maybe aren't perfect, but overall this knife is really, really great. Not only great for the price, it would be great at a much higher price. It compares well to a lot of the sort of high-end Benchmades and zero tolerances and Spydercos that it would compete with, and in fact blows them away in a lot of different areas, okay? Does very well the things that some of those other knives are trying to do. And I'm not saying some of those aren't great knives. I love a lot of those knives as well. But I will point out some places where this knife really, really shines and outpaces a lot of competitors, okay? I want to point out one of the cool things you get with a Brous blade is this certificate of authenticity, and it just says, we're pleased to offer your certificate of authenticity for your semi-custom Brous blades folder. Certifies that this product is one of a limited 500-piece run. Thanks for supporting Brous blades. Then on the back it says you get a free lifetime of sharpening and refurbishing with this knife. We recommend not to take it apart, but if there's any issue, contact me personally. This knife is 183 out of 500 of the first production run of these, and I am really, really glad to have that in my collection. By the way, I'm trying to think of a way, and if you want to comment below, I kind of display my knives in a case sort of sitting this way, right? So they'll sit on a flat surface and lean. I'd love to find a way to kind of put these two together. I just haven't thought of it yet, but somehow I'd like to sort of incorporate the certificate of authenticity into the display of this blade. Now let's get off with what we normally start off with, and that is size and weight. This knife really nails size and weight for me. You guys know I like larger blades, and especially I like when I can get a larger blade that's also pretty comfortable to carry, and that's not always the case. In fact, a lot of times I carry knives that other people would be like, whoa, that's way too big, too heavy, whatever. This knife nails size and weight. It is a 9-inch knife, essentially 4 inches and 5 inches, okay? Now, really, when you put this on a ruler, you get 3 7/8 and 5 1/8. So there's that 1/8 of an inch discrepancy, but that's not the end of the world. The handle here is a good 5/8 of an inch, and the weight on this is 6 ounces. Now, 6 ounces sounds a little heavy for a folding knife, but you need to understand what's happening here. That is exceptional for what I'm holding in my hand. You have 2 thick slabs of G10. You have the thickest liner lock that I've ever seen. Even thicker than the 0200, and lots of people have commented, here's the 0200, on how thick the 0200's liners are. Well, these are quite a bit thicker, yet not only that, but you have 3/16 of an inch of D2 blade steel. There's a lot of material here, and to get that all in under 6 ounces or at 6 ounces is exceptional. Now, just to give you an idea, the 0200 does a lot of the same stuff. You got a pretty big piece of blade steel. It's not as thick. You have thick G10 slabs. You have thick stainless steel liners. This knife is about 7.5 ounces. So this knife is able to do all the same stuff and more for less weight, which is very, very impressive, okay? And I remember it's less weight even though the liners are thicker and the blade is thicker. So kind of keep that in mind. It's very, very well done. Since I've got the 0200 out here, we'll do a bit of a size comparison because these guys are exactly the same size, and I would suspect that a lot of people are pretty familiar with the 0200. By the way, there are a lot of similarities between these knives as well. This is probably a worthy comparison for maybe a future video. Anyway, one other blade to compare because the size is very similar and the price is somewhat similar on these. This is the zero tolerance 0560, of course. you can see that they're very similar in size, and the weight on this is a little closer. This is, 6.5 ounces or something, and so it's only half an ounce more. Again, demonstrating just how impressive it is to get all of what you're getting here for 6 ounces. That's really, really good. Okay, let's talk about the blade next, and I'll need to zoom in a little bit to do that. So here we go. Oh, and my camera's going to give me an issue. Come on, come on. Not exactly sure why it's doing this to me. Okay, that's going to have to be good enough. Normally, the camera performs much better than that, but it is what it is. So, here's the blade. It is, as I said, 3 7/8 of D2 steel. Really, really thick slab of D2. Beautifully, beautifully finished. Now, probably the camera will not do this justice, but you need to know this is hand finished. And one of the reasons Jason calls this semi-custom is because it's hand finished by Jason Brous. And it is beautifully done. Just smooth as silk, gorgeous, gorgeous blade. Jason calls this a modified drop point instead of a reversed tanto, which is what I'd be inclined to call it. It is a hollow grind. It has this beautiful machined groove here, which I would call a thumb groove, that can be used to deploy the knife if you don't want to use the flipper. It is a very, very thick piece of D2 steel, and notice how much width it takes out to the edge. So see out here by my finger, look how much steel is still present all the way out here to the tip. Now that brings me to another point, which is when we talk about this as an EDC blade, you need to know this is a very, very thick edge. Okay, there's a lot of steel here. Very, very suitable for a survival knife. In fact, knives like the SCHF9, which I love, or the SC Azula are even thicker than this, but there's a lot of steel at this edge. Let me bring that 0-200 back for a second and see if you can see the difference. Notice how much thinner this is behind the edge before that secondary bevel starts compared to this one, okay? You sort of have this type of thing. I'm gonna have to put this down and demonstrate with my hands to make this point. Let's say here's the blade of your knife, and there's the secondary bevel finishing it off. With the T4, it's more like this, okay? There's a lot of material out there at the edge of the knife. Now that's going to make it very durable, very tough, but it is going to make it a little harder to sharpen because you've got more material there that you're dealing with when you're sharpening, and it's going to make it a little tougher to cut through certain things. I wouldn't, this may have some struggles if you're trying to cut up a banana or a tomato or something else with a soft substrate, because you're going to be pushing that material apart faster than you would be with something like this. Okay, and that's one of the things to consider, although I would say most of us probably aren't doing food prep with our folding knives. It is kind of something to keep in the back of your mind. Okay, I would say skinning as well, that would be a consideration for that. Now, moving on to lockup and deployment, this blade does a great job. It's a flipper, and this is the smoothest flipper I have. It is just beautiful. The detent is perfect. If it's too weak, you don't get a good flipping action. If it's too strong, it can be hard to function. It's just right. And this is one of those knives, you could flip it all day and not have that soreness, that fatigue that often develops. It's not going to rip the skin off your fingers. It is the most comfortable operating knife that I have, and in fact, by quite a large margin. One of the things that they do really, really well is here on the, let's see if I can get this angle right, here on the lock bar, there's jimping and a little cutout, and it makes it so that there is no discomfort at all when you push that over to unlock the knife. It's just perfectly smooth. By the way, the thumb groove is totally visible in the closed position and works really, really well. That's one of the things that's achieved by getting the detent exactly right. Okay, now some guys I know like a stronger detent. This to me is absolutely ideal. It's strong enough that it flips well, but it's weak enough that you can still open it with the thumb deployment, okay? Which I think is a great, great balance. It is a ball bearing pivot system and an extremely well done ball bearing pivot system. So just really, really perfect in terms of deployment. I don't know what you could find to complain about along those lines with this knife. Lockup is excellent, and again, this is by far the thickest liner lock I have ever seen. And again, I would compare the 0200, if you hold them bottom to bottom, maybe you can see the steel on the T4 is considerably thicker. And the 0200 is one of the knives that people talk about when they say, hey, this thing has a really thick liner. This thing has a really thick liner, and this is thicker yet. Okay, so you've got a super, super robust build here. This is a very, very strong knife. Now, let's move to the handle, because that's kind of the logical place to go next, and point out that these liners are extremely heavily milled out. I hope you can see in there. See if I can turn it a little bit toward the light. There we go, right about there. You can probably see that this is heavily, heavily milled out, which is one of the reasons that the weight is so, so good. It is an open, partially open pillar construction, and even in Jason's own description, he said, look, we know people like open pillar construction, but we wanted more strength. So we did a backspacer and just cut out part of the backspacer. So you kind of get the best of both worlds here in terms of the strength of a solid G10 backspacer with the ease of cleaning that comes from open pillar construction. So again, very, very useful. The handle is, of course, G10, and all of these cutouts in the G10, you know, when you kind of look at it, you go, well, okay, it kind of looks interesting, but how does it feel in hand? And then when you put it in hand, it is so perfect, it's unbelievable. These cutouts just fit with your fingers so well, it's amazing. The same thing is true of the pocket clip. It does not cause any discomfort. There are no hot spots anywhere on this knife. And one other thing, and I said there are things that this knife does really well, this large size jimping is pretty common, right? We see it in a lot of different knives, but what I've often found is that when knife makers go with the larger jimping, it ends up being too smooth. Somehow, Jason has got this exactly right. It just catches your thumb enough that it locks you in without wanting to tear the skin off, and without being too smooth that you slip off it. If I push down, look at that, it just locks in super, super tight. Same is true of the reverse grip. Very, very comfortable handle in any way that you want to hold on to it. So handle is exceptionally well executed. Again, better than a lot of competitors. Just super, super well done. Now, the pocket clip is one of those things where some people may have an issue. It is single position. It's pretty cool though, because it's kind of just one piece of metal. Now, here's one thing that I feel like is questionable. In terms of the look of the knife, it's not. I can totally understand. It looks great. However, notice how there's no screws visible here. That's because the screws are in here. In order to remove this pocket clip, you would have to take the whole knife apart. And as you read when I gave you that certificate of authenticity, Jason specifically asks you not to do that, okay? So that is one of those places where I'm like, okay, I mean, now it's not the end of the world, it's just a pocket clip. By the way, it is single position, tip up, right side carry, which is what I want anyway, so no big deal. In fact, what most people want. And I would add that that's a pretty common way of doing a pocket clip in sort of knives that are designed, okay? Just because the designer is making this and it's their vision, right? And so when this is their vision, they don't want to go messing up their vision, their perfect piece of artwork with a bunch of holes drilled in it. That's why a lot of times when you see knives that come from a designer, they are just single position pocket clips, because this is, to them, you know, this is their brainchild, this is their piece of artwork, and you don't want to go and mess up your piece of artwork by drilling a whole bunch of holes in it. Okay, so you often get that from design knives. The pocket clip is part of the design, and it has to be in that location so that it goes with the design the way that the designer wants it to. All right, so there you go, G10 backspacer, I didn't mention that. There's no lanyard hole here. Jason doesn't usually do lanyard holes, although I think on some of his newer stuff, he's kind of giving into the pressure and putting some lanyard holes on his blades. Overall, this knife is exceptional, okay? It's exceptional for the price that Jason offers it at. It's exceptional for how it stacks up against other blades at that price point. In fact, it's exceptional for even how it stacks up against blades at a much higher price point. I will just say that I got this on the secondary market for a really, really good deal, so didn't have to get into the waiting in line and all that kind of stuff that you would have to go through if you want one of these, which may be one of the things that puts you off. Let's say, you know, you are looking at a high-end, hard-use folding knife. Man, you're hard-pressed to do better than this. However, you know, you can go on Amazon any day of the week and buy this one, right? This one, you're going to be on a waiting list, you're going to be looking on secondary markets, you're going to be on blade forums, whatever, trying to find this thing. So there is that sort of drawback to the whole Jason Brous type of stuff, or really any mid-tech knife, okay? But what I can say about this knife is that it does what it's intended to do exceptionally well. It is perfect size, perfect weight, super strong. You know, it just nails every category that a hard use folder needs to nail, and does it with a lot of style. This is a beautiful knife. And I think you're hard pressed to find a hard use folder that pulls off its intended purpose with this much style, with this much cool factor, or with this much pride of ownership. This is just a gorgeous, gorgeous blade, and it allows people like you and I who don't have, you know, the funds to get into full customs to own a knife that has a lot of those same features that you look for, that level of quality, that attention to detail that you get out of a custom knife at a very, very reasonable price point. So there you go. That's my take on the Brous Blades T4. You know, I don't know if this is my favorite knife of all ever, but boy, it's close. This is just fantastic. In everything that I love about knives, this thing embodies. And so I've got to say, 2 thumbs way up on the Brous Blades T4. Absolutely exceptional knife. That's my video on the Brous Blades T4. Give you one last look at that blade. We'll talk to you later, YouTube.